Hello and welcome to this edition of Nurture Small Business, Creating a Thriving Space. To start today, I want to share something with you. The statement of if it isn't written down, it didn't happen is more important than ever during these somewhat vague and uncertain times. Businesses are being asked to take, I need to start that over.
No problem.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today. So the statement of it isn't written down, it didn't happen is more important than ever during these somewhat vague and uncertain times. Businesses are being asked to take guidelines and recommendations, new mandates, and existing laws and blend them all together. We need a way to keep track of changes we are making and information that we are sharing with employees. For some businesses, they don't know where to begin, and for others who are in heavily regulated industries already, they still need to make changes and additions to these documents, their signage, their trainings. We haven't had a pandemic in the US since 1918. That's 100 years plus ago. Welcome to the show today, Darcy Cook, Director of Emergency Management with Safety Trainers. This is our third episode with Darcy, who's going to talk about all of this and more today. Welcome, Darcy.
Hi, thanks. Good morning. Thanks, Denise. Thanks. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming back and visiting with us on this little podcast and hearing what's going on, kind of the updates. It's a very fast-paced, ever-changing topic for everybody, no matter what your industry and what state you're in. This is what we're still talking about.
Okay, and so let's jump right in. Darcy, we're going to talk about signage first. So there are new things on the horizon with signs. What kind of signs are companies having to post in their business?
Okay, so I want you guys to think about, it's not just signs inside your building, but we actually have to start by posting signs outside your building. I mean, that might even be in your parking lot, because if you're a restaurant or a retailer or even an allied healthcare professional, a counseling center, PT, OT kind of facility, your waiting rooms might not be big enough, might not allow for social distancing. Some restaurants are only allowed to do curbside pickups. Some retail stores are going to be able to open up only with curbside pickups, pre-ordering. So you have to have lots of signage outside of your building. Where do you want people to park? What direction do you want them to move around your parking lot? Should they call you inside your building so that they can come out? Are you allowing them to come up to the door? So you need to think about the new experience, right? So this is about, everyone's business is about creating a feel and experience to it. Well, you're redesigning your experience by the way you control people, employees, visitors, customers, and guests. And that's where this signage is really going to come into place. On the outside of your building, before I enter, or as I'm standing outside trying to figure out, because remember, it's a confusing time for your regular patrons. Like, you're changing things and they're trying to figure out what the new rules are so that they can buy your products and services. And so outside your building, and although you probably aren't excited about putting things on your doors or on your building or on your sidewalks, you need to start making those changes and doing it. So the idea of like no shirt, no service, we've seen those signs before. You probably have to redesign that to no mask, no service. In terms of what you want your customers to do, how you want them to behave, what you want them to say, think, or action, those statements have to be on the outside of your door. Because if you have delivery people, UPS, your FedEx guys, product and services, whether it's in the shipping, receiving, or your front doors, what are they doing? So the outside of your building is where you guys need to walk around and say, if you were the visitor guest, if you were the shipping, receiving guy, what information do you need to know about to be able to engage with your company?
Absolutely. And I'm in North Carolina, and I know we're getting ready to go into what our governor calls phase 2. And phase 2 is where restaurants can now open at 50% occupancy. There's multiple other things, obviously, with that phase 2, but this is big because restaurants have been shut down here for 2 months. So what about on the inside of the building?
Yeah, so same kind of thing, right? So when we get to the inside of the building, especially if you're a restaurant, you have a certain decor, look, and feel to it. Well, it's going to kind of get a little messy. And I've been kind of laughing and joking about it being, it's kind of like walking into a teenage girl's bedroom. You've got signs and posters everywhere. And for right now, that's kind of the look and feel to our businesses. Now, keep in mind these signs and posters, if you want to write them in a black Sharpie marker, if you want to have them professionally printed, if you just want to print it off your own computer, there's no rules around the sign itself, the paper and the materials that you're using, but there is directives around the size of the font. Although they're not telling you it has to be 14, 18, 24, the terminology says that you have to be able to see it from far away. So printing something off your computer in 12 font does not allow me to see it from far away. So you do need to keep in mind those things in terms of signage on the inside of your building.
Yeah,
Now,
I need to be within 18 inches of it.
Exactly. My glasses, I can't function without them. You give me the restaurant menu and I'm still like trying to, read what's on it. So it is a challenge for some of us. Pictures are also important. So again, what about the person who can't read, or there is a sight, challenge for your visually impaired and people, or language is not, English isn't first language. Pictograms on your signs, also universal ones, are helping to describe, to tell the story, so people stay safe and also follow what you want them to do. So on the inside of the building, let's start with the simple one, hand washing. You got to have hand washing signs in your bathrooms. You got to have posters up describing to people how to actually wash their hands. You need to tag and label like trash cans and hand sanitizers so that your employees know where they are and how to access them. Your personal protective pieces of equipment. So in a traditional business, it might have to say on the outside of the doors, do not enter without wearing a mask. In a larger company with departments and people are moving around from department to department, as you're transitioning from department to department, your PPE requirements, eye protection, face shield, respiratory, gloves, it might change. And so you need to make sure that during those entranceways or transitions that you're telling us what are the new requirements beyond these doors. Occupancy limits. You guys have break rooms, you have bathrooms, you have maybe storage and locker facilities, you have meeting rooms. You now need to post a limitation to how many people you're allowing in there. Now, people might have a clue, just like the restaurants are going to function at lower capacity. They're taking some tables out. They got to take chairs out. We have to create space. You should do that throughout your entire company, is creating space and posting what the maximum capacities are allowed in those spaces to maintain the 6-foot social distancing. Social distancing signs. So I know that you might be thinking it's common sense by now, but it isn't. So, and we're going to need to change behaviors. And for those of you who are just opening up, your employees have not learned the new behaviors yet of being in your facility. It's like starting all over again, teaching everyone. So the social distancing, saying, hey, we have to stay 6 feet apart, is just one kind of sign. What about what you're seeing in grocery stores, where you see spots on the floor and lines taped off telling us what 6 feet actually looks like, positional stuff. So we want to take that into consideration. Floor markings as well. Arrows. What's the flow of your visitors and guests and patrons in the restaurant? What's the flow of your employees going in one door and out the door in the kitchen? What's the flow in the pizza parlor in terms of moving in and out of your facility? I know at our local pizza parlor, we all go in, we go past the counter, we come back down another aisle, but we go out the same door, and we've all learned to kind of create space, step to the side to let people in and out. People will start to accommodate if you just give them guidance on like where and how they're supposed to line up and move. Your employees also need to know, if you're in a manufacturing, are we going up and down in certain directions? So how are we using hallways? You've got to guide your staff so that we're decreasing close contact and facing each other. Signs and symptoms. What's a sign and symptom of COVID-19? You've got to post that, educate everyone, so then that they start to feel that way, that they can report it. And who are they reporting that to in your company? Labeling is also, so signage/labeling, chemical storage rooms where you might not have had lots of chemicals stored in before in a particular place. Got to label those storage. Isolation rooms. What happens if I get sick right now at your company and I cannot leave? Where are you putting me to isolate and secure me? How are we marking that off? Maybe you need to have cones and signs if you're in like a larger manufacturing, shipping, receiving, large retail area. You got to block that off so no one goes inside it till you get your disinfecting done and completed. Hand sanitizers, I know I've been saying this, it's now a flammable. So based on how much you have stored, we have to put flammability signs up and warning signs like no smoking with hand sanitizer. And then of course, if you are in a space and it's safe for you to do so, opening doors and opening windows because it doesn't compromise or put a security risk to your company or business, you should have doors and windows open. We're talking about ventilation in tight spaces. So reminding your employees with signage, keep the door open, keep the windows open, or do not shut. And then of course, dirty laundry. If you're a company that has anything to do with laundry, you need to identify that this is soiled or contaminated laundry, so that makes people stop and think, oh yeah, we can't use it, touch it, and function the way we used to.
Hotels, massage therapists, that makes me think of them.
Exactly. Or even mechanics, they use rags. A lot of times with oils, now they're not washing them or laundering them, but if we've got dirty rags around, like, you know, where are those going and how are those being stored and who used it before you and can we share that now or do we have to get rid of it? All new questions for every industry to start looking at.
And so I know that a lot of industries, regular office spaces, they're going to places like Costco and picking up a variety of different things. And they're getting bulk sizes and putting them into small containers. What about labeling for that? And if you could also talk a little bit about that flammables labeling, because these are hazards that a lot of small businesses that may not be in manufacturing that deal with this on the regular may have to now deal with, like in an office space.
So a lot of small businesses, typically how they get their regular cleaning supplies that they put in their bathrooms or in the kitchenettes for small companies is somebody runs to BJ's, someone runs to Costco's. They buy the big bottle, the big containers of things because it's cost effective. And so now you have to rethink these processes. Number one, are supplies in big quantities or in smaller quantities available to you? That will be a challenge, right? Your supply chain. So based on what you have, if you're able to keep the product in its original container, okay, so if you're buying a small bottle of Windex, a small bottle of Fantastic, Clorox bleach wipes, individual containers, then those should be labeled appropriately and correctly based on the manufacturer that you purchased it from. For small businesses that aren't used to buying in bulk, who end up with big bottles and now they need to move them into smaller containers to be more manageable or cost effective because they're mixing maybe a water and bleach solution. The secondary containers need to be labeled with specific information from a safety data sheet. It might be another new word for a lot of you, again, who's not in, farm or bio-life sciences, manufacturing, even construction. You might not be familiar with a safety data sheet. You heard about it, but you didn't really know how to use it or what it tells you. It's going to guide you with the information that you have to write on these secondary containers. Again, a black Sharpie marker, make a pretty printed label, but you got to have the name. You got to have a signal word, danger, caution, warning. You also need to put hazard statements about don't drink it, don't wash up with it, don't breathe it, because it could all cause harm. You need to learn and understand what those are, and you need to make sure that those labels or Sharpie marker aren't getting worn off. It's part of hazardous communications. So if you're like looking like, oh, deer in headlights, like what is she talking about? That is a clue that you have to do some homework and research on what hazardous communications is now for your pizza parlor and your insurance agency and law firms and, mechanic office, like all of these places that probably didn't really pay as much attention as they should now have to take a look at it. And by the way, EPA products for disinfecting against COVID-19, you also need to choose those approved products. The ones I mentioned, Clorox bleach, Windex, scrubbing bubbles, Fantastic, those are actually physically listed on the website. So you should scroll through that and choose the ones that are on that list. It's not the complete list, so that you're only bringing those into your company so that you know that they're working and doing what they're supposed to do.
Can you repeat that website one more time for our listeners?
Yeah, actually, I think what we might be able to do, I don't know, Denise, if we can actually create a link for them to make it easier someplace, but you need to go to the EPA and you need to go to their table N. But if you Google search approved EPA disinfecting products for COVID-19, that link pretty much pops right up.
Perfect.
You can search and scroll through their list, or you can type in the name of your product that you want to use, and it will tell you whether or not it's a good product.
Okay. And that is as a resource on your website, or will be very shortly?
As well.
Okay.
As well.
Perfect. Okay. So now that, thank you so much for expanding on that. What do employers need to know about documentation? Because we've got all these rules relating around the PPE, the types of chemicals that are being used, but I know there's some rules around documentation too, which is kind of a hand-in-hand component with this.
Right. Nobody likes more documentation. Like, I've never met anyone that says, I love writing. I love rewriting. I just want to sit and write all day long. Like, no one gets excited about it. However, as we said, if we don't have some way to show what we've done, the changes that we've made, the communication that we're having with our employees, then it didn't happen, right? So when it comes time to litigations or investigations or citations, or, you know, we have to have something that justifies and shows our processes and our systems. So there are some new documents for a lot of companies, almost, I should say a lot, but almost all companies. We were never, unless you were in healthcare, you were never challenged under the model of infectious control, right? Screening people, TB, you know, what do you do with hepatitis, infectious diseases? What's the pre-process, the post-process? You know, having a relationship with a medical provider over all that stuff. People are like, whoa, you know what I mean? Like that, we didn't sign up for any of that. But sadly, we now have to look at our business and a different model of protecting our employees. So OSHA requires us to create a safe and healthy workplace. Our employees deserve and have a right to it. And so in this new documentation, let me kind of bullet point out some things that you should actually have in writing. And there are lots of resources. Again, the CDC has been the guide or the leading guide behind providing a lot of this, but OSHA is your bottom line federal law. So let's combine the two together, and you need to have a screening process before your employees come into your building every single day, and an ongoing basis. How are your employees screening? Self-screening, temperature checks outside the building, some combination of it. But what does your process look like for employees identifying or potentially identifying that they shouldn't be at work today? You need to put together and update an actual sick policy. If you didn't have a sick policy written down, you need to get with an HR, consultant or someone in your HR department and really write down, what does sick time look like? How is that going to function? What happens if I test positive? What happens if I'm with someone within close contact for an extended period of time who potentially is infected or it has been tested positive? You have to have written down exactly what the routine and the process is. Why? Updates and changes so that we don't discriminate. And of course, we have to be able to show, right, you know, from a regulation standpoint, that we're in compliance and that we're keeping up to date with what your state and what the CDC is telling us to do. We also have to have a return to work program. Hey, Darcy, want to come in? Sure, just come in. Like that, it can't be like that. I'm down a man. Just get in here as fast as you can. It doesn't work like that anymore. We need to actually have a return to work process if someone's been out or quarantined or tested positive, to be able to bring that person back. There's a whole piece on temperature checking. If you decide that you're going to do temperature checking as part of your screening process, then I encourage you to either go to our website and get more information, go to CDC's website. You're going to need to Google search on that, because here on the CDC website, OSHA CDC wrote clear directives on all the new things that you need to be thinking about with PPE and protocols and trainings if you're now asking employees to take temperatures of other employees. So this is an update that just recently happened this week. Also, how do I clean? What do you want me to clean? With what chemicals do I clean it with? Because there's a difference, and I keep using the word clean. So there's a whole cleaning routine, and now you have to do the same thing. How do you want me to disinfect? With what do you want me to disinfect? You know, and what chemicals am I using to disinfect? Those are two different activities, and then each has a place, and you have to train your employees and give them the right materials and PPE and equipment, including, hey, you need to dry out that mop and bucket every single night, because those wet environments breed pathogens. And so it's a whole new thought process behind what we used to take for granted, right? Because we weren't in a pandemic. And now there's a sensitivity to the way that we potentially have done things in the past that we need to change. And last but not least, your vehicles. So do you have a company vehicle? Are we doing shared? Do we have multiple people using it? Are we switching it out? We can no longer have, you know, two people in the cab together. So what does all that look like in terms of maintaining social distancing? So you have to have a disinfecting and cleaning process and a document around how you're going to manage that. And so I mention that because a lot of people haven't thought about that when they've actually forgotten about vehicles.
Yeah, I wonder how that's going to affect Uber and Lyft drivers when that reinstates. Who knows? I've seen some. What's that?
We're decreasing the sharing, right? Not a lot of sharing. Assigned vehicles, you clean your own vehicle, you take care of your own vehicle. One person, you know, jobs. It's going to be a different model.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, you know, I know that there's been a lot of changes coming around surrounding OSHA. What are some of the updates you're seeing to those policies and procedures?
Okay, so if you've already been on top of and have written OSHA policies as a result of this pandemic and the expectations at the local levels, you know, state and federal regulations and recommendations from the CDC, you need to go revisit OSHA policies that you already have written. Not only do you have to revisit them and revise them, but you also have to retrain in those. So in the first quarter of this year, if you already did your hazardous communications training, or you already did your PPE training, or you already, you know, covered bloodborne pathogens or your emergency action plan, these are all trainings that you're gonna have to repeat after you go to your current policies and update and change them with everything that you've made, all the decisions that you've made in your engineering and your administrative controls, to update your employees on. So if you've never gotten yourself up to speed with writing OSHA policies, if you don't have a current updated one, like you wrote them a long time ago and they're just collecting dust, you might be better off on just looking at the categories of hazardous communications, PPE, housekeeping, sanitation, disinfecting, hygiene, trash, bloodborne pathogens, and emergency action plan. Take those categories and then just write stuff potentially from scratch related just to the pandemic changes that you've made in your company. And then, of course, if you made the decision to wear N95 respirators, that is different than a face covering or a surgical mask. If you decided to do that, then you have to look at, and you must have a written respiratory protection program. Now, keep in mind, if you're in this category, you really need to make sure that you're up to speed with the exemptions and the updates from OSHA on here, including the medical documentation that you have to do and where those medical documents should go. We shouldn't be putting them in regular files, the confidentiality behind that. So again, for some of you, there might be a significant learning curve to the documentation piece.
Absolutely. And I know we talked a lot about PPE last time. So for our listeners, if you're just tuning in, this is a 4-part series and we're in number 3. If you want to learn about some of those requirements specific for PPE and what type of PPE you should choose, you know, go back and listen to our second episode. So Darcy, what else do you see as far as businesses start to open?
Yeah, so I mean, when businesses start to open, I hope they've used this time to be reading and keeping as best as they can up to date with their trade association information, which I think the trade associations, if you're in manufacturing, you read manufacturing. If you're in restaurant, you read restaurant. If you're in professional services, you read about what the insurance industry is doing, about what HR, you stay in your zone. Those associations have done a great job of making recommendations. I hope you've gotten together with your teams. You've had open conversations about this, brainstorming together. My experience and background is different than your experience and background, but collectively together, we bring in different perspectives. You think of something that I didn't think of. I think of something you didn't think of. It makes me think of something else. And we really have to kind of brainstorm and be creative, because remember, there are no two companies that are alike. We're in the same storm. We are not in the same boat. So talking to other companies in the same industry, taking some of their ideas, sharing some of your ideas will help you as a business get up to speed, get compliant, create a safe and healthy work environment as fast as possible, and get back to business, right? I was listening to someone last night speak, and I can't take credit for this analogy, but my analogy is a light switch versus a light dimmer. So we can't just flick the switch, turn on our business, and go back to business as usual. But what we do have is we have a light dimmer. And so based on what's happening in your company, based on what's happening in your towns and cities and your state, and of course across the country, you have to adjust this light dimmer up and down. And as you make these changes because someone has told you you had to, or you make it because something is or isn't working, there's a more cost-effective way to do it, there's a more effective way to do it, meaning more of your employees are on board with the idea, you then have to go back to the paperwork that we were just talking about. You need to go back to the signs that we were just talking about. You have to edit those, you have to update those and make changes, and then again, retrain your employees and the changes, then the decisions that you guys have made. So take this as it's the dimmer. You have control. You get to go up and down with it. It's not going to be able to just flick it on and everyone to be back to business. So one day at a time, let's keep working together. Let's keep having these conversations. And if anyone has any recommendations for additional webinars or podcasts that we should be doing, Denise, I would encourage people to make comments and get back to you, because we'd be happy to kind of expand our conversation a little bit more based on what's happening now that people are back to business.
Absolutely. Anybody can email me at denise@dcavirtual.com. Darcy, tell folks how they can reach you as well.
Yeah, so you can reach us at safetytrainers.com. Our number is 508-799-2857. We just launched a brand new website. Thank you to our friends at DCA Virtual. You guys did a fantastic job. Your team has been spectacular. And we redesigned our website specifically with the intent of being able to put more resources up on our site to help businesses get back to business, but get back to business safely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to our fourth and final podcast, unless somebody sends us in some great ideas for another. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.